Welcome back, friends, to another weekly video. This week we are talking about earnings per share, and I'm going to be telling you the problem with earnings per share. Now, not a whole lot of people talk about the problems with earnings per share, but it's just like any other financial metric. So there's benefits to it, but there's also shortcomings. And if you take the time to be really thoughtful and think through the concept of earnings per share, it is going to help you in your career. In my experience in the business world, earnings per share is the most talked about financial metric. Everybody talks about it. And the crazy thing is, I have never talked about earnings per share on this channel. I have made a ton of videos about financial topics, and I have never once talked about earnings per share. And the reason for that is really my own personal conflict over this metric. I think this is often used as a misleading metric. It only tells part of the story of a company. Let's start by talking about the definition. So the point of earnings per share is it's supposed to give you a very simple, very quick metric to gauge the performance of a company. And it's a very simple calculation. Net income divided by number of shares. So this describes how much income of the company is allocated to you as a shareholder. So if you own 1% of the stock of a company, you have the right to 1% of the income if it is paid out as a dividend. This is used very frequently by stock investors as part of the PE ratio to determine the price of stocks. So the benefit of using earnings per share is it is quick, it is easy, it is simple, it is a way to determine the performance of a company. The problem with earnings per share is it emphasizes short-term payouts to investors. So every quarter, your business is going to issue financial statements. On those financial statements is earnings per share. So that earnings per share metric drives real-life business decisions and not always with the right result. Because earnings per share emphasizes short-term gains over long-term performance. So here's what's going on here. You are trying to use a quick, simple equation to evaluate a complex organization. Life is more complicated than that. A lot of business decisions don't have a direct correlation with earnings per share. In fact, most business decisions don't. And so this causes a lot of confusion. In my opinion, in the business world today, this is the greatest paradox of our time. Companies are judged by earnings per share, but earnings per share does not drive most business decisions. And I'll give you a really simple example. Corporate giving. Most corporations engage in some form of corporate giving, whether it's through volunteer hours or corporate donations. But if earnings per share is guiding your decisions, how would a company ever participate in any corporate giving? You are literally giving away the company's money. So if your job is to increase earnings per share, how do you rationalize any corporate giving? So this is just one example, but there are many more. The paradox continues all throughout business. When you are a business leader, you have a number of different areas you can invest in. You can invest in employees, customers, community, research and development, and investors. Well, only one of these 5 places will increase your earnings per share in the short term. Now, ultimately, investments in the other 4 areas will increase your earnings per share in the long term, but it is at the expense of your investors in the short term. This conflict between short term and long term is a very real conflict you are going to face in the day-to-day operations of running a business. So I am making this video for the business leaders out there who are sitting behind their desk and they're struggling with decisions on how to run their company. Here's what happens. When you go to business school in America, they pound it into your head, earnings per share, earnings per share. You have a legal responsibility to maximize returns for your shareholders. In fact, if you don't, they can sue you. And so in business school, they just pound it into you, earnings per share, earnings per share. And then you get out of business school and you get a job in the real world. So you're sitting behind your desk and you know you have to protect the interests of your investors, but you also realize you have all of these other stakeholders. You have your employees, you have your customers, you have the community, and you need to do things for all of these people. You need to give training to your employees, but you also need to be paying out dividends to your investors. So you have this conflict in your head. What do you do? What decision do you make? And you go back to what they taught you in business school. Earnings per share, earnings per share. Let me offer you a different perspective. Your job is not to take care of the investment bankers. The bankers can take care of themselves. Your responsibility is to be a business leader. And so what you should be doing is you should be looking at all of your stakeholders and making the right decision for your company. And the right answer might be to decrease earnings per share in the short term so that you can achieve greater gains in the long term. So for all you business leaders out there who are struggling with decisions, you need to realize something here. The economic system in America is skewed. It is skewed to favor investment bankers. And this has to do with the history of America and how the banking system developed, and I'm not saying that's all bad. What I'm saying is that you today have a decision to make. And you should not make that decision based on a metric that is designed to be skewed to favor the bankers in the short term. The funny thing here is that intuitively, we all know this is true. That's why you struggle with this when you're sitting behind your desk. And I have to give credit to business schools here, because business schools do teach opposing viewpoints. Business schools do teach you should take care of your employees. They do teach you should take care of your community. The problem is, business schools set up this paradox. They say, on the one hand, you should be increasing earnings per share at all costs. And on the other hand, they say you should be engaging in things like corporate giving. Well, what's the right thing to do? What are you going to do when you get out there in the workforce? Let me tell you what you should do. Your job is to be a business leader and do the right thing for your company. It is possible to connect the dots between these two opposing viewpoints by doing two simple things. Recognize multiple stakeholders in decisions, and recognize that earnings per share is a valuable but imperfect metric. Earnings per share does have an important role to play in understanding your business. It is my hope that we use this metric in a very thoughtful way. You know, in business, our decisions impact the real lives of all sorts of stakeholders, and it should be our goal to improve everybody's life and set up our business for long-term sustainable success. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about earnings per share? Go ahead and leave your comments down below. I want to know what you think. And if you like this video, if you found it helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. The best way to supercharge a business is through accounting and corporate finance, and I release a new video every week, so come back and check out next week's video.